In today's episode, Nancy and Aileen have a special guest, Lissa Blackfacet. Today we talk about Lissa's son, Darby, and even though years ago he left the planet due to his choice through a heroin overdose, Darby has been an active part of her life for all these years and will continue to be an active part of her life. So we talk about how even though people may not be here in body form, their consciousness, their existence is still existing and showing itself in our lives on a daily basis.
Welcome to Expansive Minds Podcast, Gateway to Freedom, a podcast where two friends, Aileen and Nancy, explore and expand beyond what they think they know in order to live a life of freedom. Thank you for joining us, and away we go.
Hello. You guys could say hello.
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 Look what just
Hello. Oh,
happened.
the screen blip.
But we'll talk about
So
that.
we're going to explain our theory on why we think this back screen is
It's
blipping.
all good. It's all good. We're not
So
worried about
welcome. So we're very excited. We have our first guest, Lissa, today. So I will set the intention, and then I'm going to hand it over to Aileen, who is buds with Lissa, and everything is going to be explained. All will become clear.
Or not.
Or not, which
Or-
is also what we
and
go
we'll just-
for. We like
It's all good.
More questions, more questions.
Exactly. We're always asking questions. Okay. Deep breath, grounded, connecting to Mother Earth. All right, we are channels of love and light, and set the intention that today we bring peace to so many people with the discussion that we're going to have today. And so it is.
That was a great one. That was a good one.
Yeah, that for relevant. So,
Absolutely. All right. So this morning we have a guest, which is great. Lissa, thank you for coming. And so we're just going to start like we do, like Nancy and I do. We're just going to start talking. And I've known Lissa for a while. I knew Lissa before she recognized that she knew me.
That's a story.
That's all part. There's so much of the story. And we have something different in front here. We have their plant, but we have this book. And Lissa is the author of this book called Alive in This World, Tracking Light Through the Wilderness of Grief. This is Lissa
the most
Blackfacet.
gorgeous artwork.
Yeah, if
Such
you can see that
beautiful
cover of that,
artwork.
It's really
Yeah.
beautiful. So Lissa is the author of this book, and so we are going to talk to her about this book and about her journey. So, Lissa,
Yes.
hi, thanks
Hello.
for coming.
Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, this is great. And so, yeah, your journey, as we know, so I had met you because I knew Dan, your husband Dan, from doing youth work together. And then I'd met your son Darby a couple of times when he was attending a conference. And then over the years, I knew him a little bit more, and he became involved in a group that I had, So, and then, even though you and I had sort of crossed paths, we really got to know each other a handful of years ago.
Yes.
And so I will just start by saying, I got the message that Lissa's son, Darby, had died of a heroin overdose. And then next thing I know, Lissa's at my door. And that's kind of
Good
where...
place to be.
That's
As I
Good
found
place
out,
to be.
it was the place to be.
And so that's where our relationship started. And her book begins prior to that. So I don't know, what you want to say or kind of start that off.
Well, Darby was a student at UMass Amherst at the time, and he was in his last year or so, we thought. There was a lot that was hidden. There's a lot hidden in this story that has come out over the years, and in many, many, many ways, not just about that. But at one point, he came home for Christmas and he was sick, and we were all sick. I rarely get the flu, but I had the flu, and he had symptoms like that. But in the previous, after that, when he went back to school, I had given him my credit card because he was, to use judiciously, and I was going to take it back. We saw signs that we did not interpret as signs, but just that's another thing and another thing. And he wasn't in touch with us for months, and that was very unlike. And we both called him, he called us. We had a really nice relationship, as he was becoming an adult. So, and it was all, he would explain, he was lying to us because he didn't want to hurt us, and he didn't want us to be part of this thing that he had fallen into, or, he chose this path, but the path was heroin. And so anyway, there's a lot I could more say about that, but in terms of this, what brought this book into existence was when we got the call, and that's where this book starts, when we got the call from paramedics out in Hadley, where he lived with roommates, saying, I can't even remember, it's just, some of that is just a complete blur, but that they were working on him. Did he have any medical conditions? And I took the call, and we had just talked to Darby, all of us.
Earlier.
My mother was visiting, Dan, my husband, and me. We'd all had a nice little chat, and there's so many pieces of this. And there were things around Darby that he had disappeared from his friends, and he had begun to show up, and he would see people they hadn't seen in a long time. And I've heard sometimes that when people kind of, something in them knows that they're going to be transitioning, or and that would have happened in hindsight. I saw this, but anyway, so I got this call, and everything changed. Everything changed in my life. My mother was, I was trying to calm her. I called Dan to the phone, and we just said, we've got to go up to Cooley Dickinson Hospital. And anyway, so that was the beginning of my what would become my awakened life. But it was like a bomb was detonated, and I just didn't know where I was. So your question was just to kind of introduce. Now I could just keep on talking.
No, you're doing great. No, you're doing great.
so-
And the thing
so-
I wanted to mention too, as I'm listening to you talking about Darby. Hi, Darby.
I know.
Hi, Darby.
This has never done this
look,
before,
look.
and now
I
it's
know,
back on.
I know. We'll get into
We do
that.
wanna
as we
talk
a little
about
bit
how
the
Darby
book.
is
And now we're not
definitely will be.
surprised. This has been
Yeah.
going on and off, and they've been like fixing it. But okay, so that's all also part of the book.
yeah.
But one of the things I really want to point out at the beginning, because I did also know Darby, is that I think it's important for the kind of technical human-based aspect of this to say that Darby's a good kid. I mean, he was a rascal. Like he was, he was hilarious. He wrote poems. He did music. He wasn't, that's the piece that I think is really important. That there wasn't necessarily a need for you to be suspicious that he was doing heroin, and I think that that's such a big piece to bring out, because there's lots of people who have gone through addictions, or their children, or their partners, and Darby was a good kid. He pushed the edges of things, but he wasn't, like, I wouldn't say he was a big high risk taker.
No,
But
he wasn't.
I think with heroin, you don't need to be.
Well, but what I'm
Right?
saying,
I think if you just are like, that's an interesting experience, I'll try it once. There is no once.
There is no
Well,
there is
right,
no
and
once.
that's what I want to say
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
I think we have had a judgment of who does
Exactly.
heroin and what makes you do it and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So I just kind of want to say out loud, Darby was, he was a kid, and because drugs are so much more prevalent and so easy to get these days.
And so
all
powerful,
different kinds,
and
and
more
so
powerful, more hooking,
and weird.
And may I
And,
even
like,
extract it up another level? Because who are we to say that Darby, and you would maybe, as you've been talking with him, may know more, but maybe he came into this time-space reality at this time to do this.
Right, there's a whole, that's
Because
a very
something
big piece of
unfolds
it.
after it.
There's
Yeah.
definitely
Exactly.
a trajectory
Yeah.
there that I've become aware of, and
Exactly.
so that's a big part of this picture. And we had a year after he died. That's another story. It's in the book. There's
So
lots to
many.
say about that, but
Yeah.
it was called "Be the One," and it was all that we had learned about that aspect of his there was dealing with his death and that, and there was also the social aspect, which was integrated with it. That exactly what you said. We wanted a no shame, no blame.
Right.
Our kids
Move through
are
the stigma.
dying for something, and I mean that like maybe literally, and also dying for more love in the world and
Right.
more attention to that part of us anyway. But that's a big part of the book. But I did want to mention the other thing that I wrote about in the beginning, because this is about my experience with Aileen. It just set this thing in motion. And when they say that when you need the teacher will appear or something, I said,
That's beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah.
no kidding. Well, anyway, so there was, but then before I appeared at Aileen's door, I had this really amazing, in retrospect, amazing, not in a good or bad way. It was just an incredible experience, because I was like in a fog. It was during those first weeks after he died, and I was just gone somewhere. I left.
Right.
I left my body, and I was somewhere, and I didn't know what to do, and I couldn't even talk to Dan. I didn't even know what to tell him, because he's grieving as well. And one night, my mother was in the house at the time. I was walking around the house. It was dark. It was night, and I went out to my front steps, and I sat down there. It was the moon was out. I'm not sure if it was a full moon, but it was starry. It was just a beautiful night, because he died in May. It was it was so incongruous for such this beautiful season coming, and I couldn't just everything about that. I just did not know what was happening to me and where to go. But I was sitting on the steps, and my cats were out there, and they were kind of weaving in and out of the shadows. And all of a sudden, I don't know where this came from, but I looked up, and I felt, amid all the chaos, I felt this kind of calm come over me. And I just looked at the sky and says, I'm going to get to the bottom of this, and I'm going to find my son. And I didn't have any particular belief or not that way. I was kind of, I'll find out when I need to find out. So I just felt this incredible peace, and I'm going to find him. And it didn't last. It wasn't a lasting thing. It just was. I felt like I was in a place where my mind was so opened, my being was so opened, that this was here, and this spiritual reality open. I wasn't looking at this at the time like that. I'm just saying, I wasn't judging myself. I wasn't doing anything. I'm going to find him, and I'm going to figure this out. There was something to figure out.
So you set your intention.
Exactly.
And I know, but I
And
had no
and
idea
how
that's what
perfect
I
that
was
you
doing.
didn't feel one way or another, because that would hinder your path.
Right, well,
That's right.
So yes,
yes.
the clay was ready for the maker. So
It was
to
so pure.
speak, so pure.
So pure, so profound.
It was one of the most
and the
amazing.
love of a mother wanting to find her child. So
Right. And I find that's in talking to people, that's very common across the board, with no matter what your beliefs are. And I think if you don't have that, you're going to be lost in this. But how did I know that Darby was there to find? I don't know.
Right.
I mean, it's a mystery to me. But I feel so then I was kind of propelled into this mystery, which I explored with Aileen, and the circumstances were right with both of us, that we had time to. I had been laid off from my job. If I hadn't been, I would have had to go back to work like that, I'm sure, because
Right.
that was my mindset, and we needed money, and you need to make a living. But I didn't, so I had a couple of years, and you had some
I was switching
time
over,
yes,
yeah.
whatever. So we were able to have these amazing adventures with Darby guiding us and
So
popping up, and that's really what the book is about. I kind of I talk. Well, it's when you hear about spiritual awakenings, it's kind of that's what this is, like dark night of the soul. All of that is really the hero's journey. And not just everybody has. I think everybody in life has a hero's journey to go through, as Joseph Campbell said.
Agree.
So I talk about a lot of the experiences that we had. Was just Aileen, me, and Darby doing this weird stuff.
I remember the scavenger hunt thing. So we should pull it into, because the nature of this show, we pull it into energy.
Yes.
Because that helps us understand it more. Darby's vibrating at a frequency. You're grieving. Can't get there from there, which is such a conundrum. When you lose a loved one, you grieve and your frequency drops, and then you can't reach them.
Well, no, okay. So, as sort of what Lissa was saying about when she had that profound moment, okay, so even though she was in grieving, because she got blown open, there's an opening because you let go of your reference points.
Gotcha.
So because she had that feeling of, I'm going to get to the bottom of this, and for her, she made that a North Star. And when she was saying, like, if you hadn't, you were like, I would have been like floating around. Yeah. That's what you're saying. I would agree. So
there is a time frame though where you kind of float. You have to float.
Yeah. So when a spiritual awakening happens in the dark night of the soul, up to this point, it still usually is because you get blown open. It's from a traumatic event. I actually attended a conference of a couple of universities and psychotherapists, and everybody got together, and that was really the big theme. Does this kind of spiritual awakening, dark night of the soul, does it have to start from this really terrible, horrible place? And after the entire weekend was through, and there were talking about 350 of us there, we all were like, yeah, we've all talked.
I was hoping you were going to say, I'm waiting for her to say, and the answer is, oh, damn.
But at that point, you know what I mean? Because, if we go back to the Beatniks, we go back to Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg, like the whole Timothy Leary, like that whole concept was, if you smoke weed, if you do drugs, then that's the way you can drop out. And what they were talking about is, don't be attached to this story, this framework. You know, Liz is saying she had this free time because she got laid off. But guess what? If she'd been working, how much grieving time would her job have given her? Right. Like, okay, your son died. You have this much time. Then we expect you to be able to get back to work.
I'm even going to give her credit for being laid off. Like, she manifested that.
Right.
Because she knew what she
the
knew.
whole, this is the whole, this is the whole thing. Yes. So, yes to what you're saying about the grieving. However, when you get hit with that, that's the moment, that's the potential to, like, whatever. So when people get into recovery, like AA or something like that, right? Typically there's like this big crappy thing that happens through drugs and alcohol. Then if they choose to get involved in a place, and AA, all the 12 steps, it's all spiritual program. If they get involved, what happens is you're blown open and new information can come in. New information can come in. Yeah. And so the grieving is important to be so overwhelmed by it that you can't have your regular life. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And again, to your point, if people choose to, and Lissa had that experience, it's in the book, she went to a group and the people chose to hold on to their grieving, and then they couldn't get to their children.
Right.
So that is, right? I mean, would you say
yes, I would.
that was your experience?
Because I was still in that raw state. It was only 2 months after Darby died that it was way too soon to go to a group like that, but there was a purpose in that too.
Yeah.
I said, I cannot accept this because it was against my prime directive.
Right. Do you want to say a little bit about that group? Just kind of what that was.
Just a little. And I'll use the example. Well, they had.
So it was a grieving group.
It was a grieving group, and they're very nice people.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was all. Yeah, they welcomed me.
Yep. Everybody's on their
support
important journey.
But they had come to an agreement among themselves, and they rejected the previous facilitators' declaration or whatever, that that we were going towards healing. They said we all, so they had a new kind of charter, if you want to call it that we all agreed that you don't recover, you don't heal from grief. You just find ways to manage it.
Right, to
What's the
cope
word?
with
To
it,
cope
cope
with
with
it.
it.
Coping mechanisms is
So
what.
that's to your point. If you're staying
So-
in that, you can't.
Yeah.
And it just scared the hell out of me, and I just.
You instinctively knew, like,
It was all. I was
not
still. It was
not for
all
me.
instinctual. If I had my skeptical mind, because I am very skeptical, and you are too.
So
I'm
we
sure
are.
we are.
Right,
Yeah.
we talked about
Which
it,
is
yeah.
why this is really. You really get to the depth of things because you're questioning constantly. Like question. And I don't know what our time is, but I do have a story that in one of our sessions that we had that kind of speaks to this point. And it's also about attachment and attachment to thoughts, attachment to beliefs. And I don't know, couple of years, whatever. I was really I would go up and down, and I was in a really bad place. And I came to my session with Aileen. We'd had one every week for a couple of years anyway. And she was working energetically I was on the table, and she was working with me. And I felt like you kind of go in and out over the course of grief. It's like that, but it comes in waves. But she was saying, well, and I was just crying. I'm in such a bad place. And she says, well, describe it. So I feel like I'm in a cave, and I can't breathe. I'm just being suffocated, or something like that. And then she would challenge me. Well, can you make some space in the? I said, no, I didn't say that. I never said anything to Aileen. But in my mind, I was like,
I've cursed her a lot in my mind on that table. When I've been on that table, boy, the things I've wanted to say to you on that
I'm
table.
going to be clean for this. I won't say what I thought. But so, but it was that she was pushing me. She was challenging me. And because I was there to be challenged, even though I just wanted someone to say, you poor thing, I know, just hold me and whatever in some space. But so anyway, we worked at it. And these are actually, well, they're two different. I'll finish this little story. And at some point after that, we had changed energetically. We had changed that space into, well, this is where you're. Can you put curtains there? Can you put a door? Can you make space for Darby to come in and all energetically? So I felt myself just, that's what vibration is because you can feel
it. actually is a reality.
It is a reality.
Yes. Yes.
It's a scientific reality.
Yes.
So
Absolutely
when we're
is.
part of that. So, but and there was another thing that happened after that in another session that was kind of what I was thinking of when we were talking about attachments to outcomes. Attachment. This is what you're attached to an idea of who you would be in the future, and you'd have grandchildren, or whatever it is that Darby would be there, and you would die first, or that you would have this, or you would have that, and I felt it deeply in me. I just was mourning all that, but at some point, and this happens, and it happened a lot in your workspace, that I began to see. Suddenly, all of the garbage in my mind, all of the because the attachment to those thoughts, it just stopped, and I think I was ready for it, and that's why it did. And I began to see the whole thing as like almost kind of like a little plague rolling out in front of me. Well, I'm attached to that thought. That's different than feeling sad about Darby not being here. That's what suffering is, and I was able to like detach them. There's suffering and there's sadness, or
Yes.
and they're
yes.
different things. And the suffering, as the Buddhists are always
Doesn't need to
talking
be.
about, it doesn't need. You have a choice in that. I mean, it's not an easy choice because you have to go through this crap. But that was the beginning. I think that was the beginning of really beginning to heal. So I just wanted to, because we were talking about consciousness and
Right.
That's a critical shift. And I want to talk about the adventures, because I remember you telling me one time I was on the table, you're like, we just had a scavenger hunt with Darby or something. I'm like, okay. But Jonah, baby, how are we doing? I know we're going to be over. Is Jonah there?
He's running.
Here, he's opening the door.
you guys are a bit over, but you can keep going if you want.
All right, we do
right,
one.
we'll do-
Because
yeah,
I
we'll
do
do
want
a
to have
couple
a few
things
fun
here.
Darby
Okay.
You set
adventures.
a timer for like 10 minutes if you want, or you set a timer for however.
What do you think? We'll get a couple of Darby adventures and then we'll.
Yeah.
And then we'll.
Possible.
Thank you, baby.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the kind of logistics of it is that everything worked out so that every Wednesday, the whole day was for Alyssa and Darby, like every Wednesday, and I never knew what was going to happen. And I'd be sort of getting ready. And you must have come over like probably 9 in the morning or something like that, I imagine. And I would be getting ready, and it was at my house. You know, my office is a home office. So then I'd be like, what are we doing, guys? What's happening? What are we doing? And it was so great for me because in the desperation came the freedom to just let the energy show itself.
Nice.
Right? Because if you think about it, it's like, you know, those are those times when it happens where someone shows up and they're so blown that it's like, let's do everything we can, you know. And
So
I
you
got
would
to be,
say,
"Let's
so
do
Darby
it."
would say, let's go to the beach.
Or somebody else.
or
We don't even
somebody-
know.
Oh, you
Who
would
even
be
knows?
saying,
It could be a
you'd
guide,
get,
guardian.
let's go to the beach. And then you would find
Yes.
something that definitely was a
Yes.
Darby
Definitely.
thing.
Yeah.
It's unmistakable. I mean,
Yeah, it was wild. Yeah, so she would show up, and sometimes I'd say, well, maybe you would have like hiking boots, like, you know, your car would just like have stuff in it because we just didn't know. And I'd
you were
say,
gonna
she'd
go.
come in, I'd say, nope, we're going to be here, we're going to do some table work, or I don't know where we're going, and that happened a lot. I'm like, I don't know, we're just going somewhere, and we'd get in the car, and I'm like, okay, where, and then I would hear these things, and what was great is I didn't know all of it. I mean, I'd known Darby, but I didn't know Darby. So at one
That's
point,
perfect, because you
it
don't
was
infuse
perfect.
you in.
Exactly, it was great, and it also, from the skeptical mind, was like at one point we were driving, and I knew I was supposed to turn down this road, and I was like, and I, as a skeptic, and I definitely I would talk back, and that's why I'm surprised that any energy ever talks to me, because I'm like, what? I'm not doing that. Doesn't make sense, you know. Instead of like, okay, I'm like, so I'm driving, and they're like, turn down that road. I'm like, I'm not turning down that road. And Liz is in the passenger seat, and they're like, you should turn down that road. And I was like, I don't know why. No, I don't even know where we are. Why am I turning down this road? What's happening? And then I looked at Lissa and I said, all right, I got to turn around. I got to go back down that road. I don't know why. And Lissa said, oh, that's the road that Darby took to work.
Aww.
I know. Oh, and there were so many there. I mean, I don't know how much time you have.
Yeah, pick a good one, and then I
You
want
can
to
get the book, by the way. You can
pick
get
a
the
good
book.
one, and I want to share too that you really impacted my Gabby. Gabby was in middle school, and you guys went on the sweat,
Yeah,
the sweat
up in
lodge,
Maine, yeah.
and you gave Gabby a gift, and it was a mask that Darby made.
Yes.
And I walked by Gabby's room one day after that, and I heard her talking. I go, who are you talking to? What are you saying? She's like, I'm talking to Darby. I can't find my book, and he helps me find things. Okay? Crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Crazy is normal.
well.
But, yeah.
Okay. Well, one story. It's more of a quick story that we could. It was about. Well, we neither Elaine or I are particularly enamored of going to the mall.
I don't like the mall either.
I hate the
Isn't
mall.
that funny?
Yeah,
I'm
not
not-
our
not
thing.
We had a couple of things, but one time we said we're going to the mall, and we look at each other. All right.
Thanks a lot, Darby. Yeah.
And again, it's just that we did it as we went along.
Right, so I didn't know
Aileen
why we were going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were looking around. He says, "Oh, okay, we're here." So now we're just walking along, and Aileen said, well, "Let's go into the Disney store." So we had this long conversation about how much I don't like Disney. And it finally got to. She said, "Well, you took Darby there, and did he love it?" He loved it. So of course. So we were working on detaching from thoughts like that. So we were working.
Right,
So we went into the Disney store. We're looking around, and I felt my vibration rising just because
You
I was
did
thinking
great,
of
by the way.
him, and he would have loved that as a little
Yes.
kid. So we turned around, and all of it.
weird.
I turn around and I look on the floor, and there's this big box with a doll in it, and it was called the Darby doll, and and on it said think Darby, and I so
Yep.
we burst out laughing. And I don't know what the rest of the
Oh my
people
God,
did.
my head is tingling. Wow.
I actually felt him loving
Yes.
that moment, you
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
and it was just and we laughed out loud, and people probably thought we were, where is that? I need some of that. So.
And to me, this is inspiring because if you get good at this, meaning good at letting go and trusting and
Yes.
allowing and truly knowing that this is real, you can still have relationships.
Yes.
Even though they may not be in this time, space, reality, they are
Right.
in a different form. And
Right.
you can still have them. That's beautiful.
At one point, Darby was, I don't remember exactly what we were doing in that session. I think you were writing things down because there were so many different things that happened because we were just going with the energy. And at one point, Darby said, Mom, don't be body prejudiced. Which is so what Darby would have said. Like, just because I don't have a body doesn't mean I'm not here and I don't have value.
Oh, I
And
thought you were like dissing. I'm too fat. I'm too thin.
No,
no
don't.
body prejudice. That's
Like that you're only talking to people who've bodies. But you know, it was
perfect. It broke the energy up. Lissa was like, I think you were writing something. There was paper down. You were drawing or whatever.
Yeah.
And he just came out with it. And that's the fun part too.
I'm going to coin that new term.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's so don't be
I
body
love it.
prejudiced. And we looked because we knew it was Darby, and it was like, oh my gosh, and we laughed so hard. So the wisdom, that's the other part. You know, the not only getting to see him and get to talk with him, and just the presence, the wisdom and the sharing, and just the perspective that he has now.
Yeah. Which is that cover. That's perspective.
Yeah, isn't that gorgeous?
Those birds of prey. That is perspective. So unfortunately, we are running out of time.
We are running out of time.
So I don't know if you two wanted to collectively give us some inspiration for the week. We usually end with any lessons learned and how we can help other folks kind of maybe who are working through this.
Right. The one thing I was thinking is, and it goes with our more to be revealed that we say.
Yeah.
This was an extremely awkward moment in the very beginning when Lissa came. I was working on her on the table, and of course she's grieving, broken, and so much pain. And as I'm working on her, I can't help it, but I'm sort of starting to laugh because I can
How appropriate.
Totally wrong. And I'm apologizing while I'm laughing. I'm like, Lissa, I'm really sorry. I'm saying, but you and Darby are going to do something. And I had gotten transported, probably by Darby, into the future where I'm saying to Lissa, you and Darby are going to do something. You're going to do something. I know this sounds weird. I don't know what to say. I go, but I'm so filled with like joy and happiness. I can feel that the two of you are going to do something. And this is when this woman first comes to me grieving. And then years after we had been together, Lissa had said, I don't know how it came up, but you said, I have written down, every time we had a session, I went home and I wrote it down. And I'm like, whoa, you recorded everything? And she did. And that's what it was like, ding, 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 ding. That was what Darby was telling me, is that they were going to do this as a team. And one of the things that Darby had said along the way was, when he was talking to Lissa, and he said, and he is so, I mean, he's so great. Darby's so great. Darby was saying, Mom, yes, I wrote songs and I wrote poetry. Like, he wanted to make a difference in the world, but he's like, my songs were not that good. Remember, he's like, they weren't that great. I wasn't going to have the impact. But together, this is how we're having an impact. This is how we're having the shift. So that's just an example of the more to be revealed and trusting the energy in the moment.
Yep. That's all that I would add to that. That when you said that, I wasn't saying this woman is nuts or she's.
I have often.
You do.
Still do.
But anyway, in that moment I didn't say
Something made sense.
Yes. So, but because something in me knew, so what I do just like to add to that is the key to this all for me is to trust in that greater consciousness that you're part of. Trust and surrender to it.
Beautiful. Trust and surrender.
It's like Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wow. Thank you so much for coming.
thank you.
It's
It's
so
been
great
a wonderful
to see you,
conversation.
as always. And this is really amazing. And I will
Alive
say,
in
it's
this
a like the stories in here are great. And Lissa is a beautiful writer, a beautiful, beautiful writer. And the feedback I've gotten from people who've read this book, it's been incredibly helpful for all sorts of grieving, because you're so raw and you're so real in this, and you are a beautiful writer. So I want to thank you, for
And I'm going to even
sharing
add,
this.
not just in the ink on the page, but like we say, it's not necessarily what we're saying on this show.
It's the energy of it.
That energy is infused. So anybody who picks up that book
Yes,
or reads
that's a
it
good
even
point.
electronic is
Yeah.
going to get a piece of Darby.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So he can help you find things and, and be there for you and screw up your TV.
There's practical information
So
in
many,
here.
so many reasons that we know that that's Darby.
Yeah. And as always, more to be revealed.
Thank you for joining us on Expansive Minds podcast, Gateway to Freedom. Until next time, more to be revealed.